Dear students, welcome to massive open online course on research methodology in history. Today we shall be discussing on positivism in history. Now before we go into the depth of the topic, first of all we need to understand what is positivism all about. Positivism refers to the idea that the methods of natural science provide the principle and the only procedure for the attainment of knowledge. So this is the basic idea about positivism. It stands for actual, absolute, and dependable knowledge derived by the application of scientific methods similar to natural sciences. So, in positivism, the basic idea is that the methods, the laws which are followed in natural sciences are the only way or only source of true knowledge. Application of this concept in social sciences gained momentum by the wake of the scientific revolution in the 17th century. Now, with the coming up or with the emergence of scientific revolution, we find that application of positivist ideas or positivism in social sciences started. Now, what is scientific revolution? Scientific revolution took place in Europe during the 16th and the 17th century when significant developments took place in several branches of sciences like mathematics, physics, astronomy, biology, and chemistry, among others. We find that during this period, noteworthy scientists like Nicolaus Copernicus and Isaac Newton making important contributions to the growth of new scientific thinking. So with the emergence of this new wave of scientific awareness, we find that emphasis on the application of positivist ideas or positivist laws in social sciences gained momentum. Efforts to interpret, now we shall talk about what is positivism in history. Efforts to interpret historical knowledge as scientific also developed as a result of the scientific revolution. And as all of us we know that history is not different from social sciences, it is the mother of social science. So positivism in history was a reaction to Romanticism that perceived history writing as more imaginative by making arguments their organic connections and the notion of liberty and progress as the main subjects of their argument. So in Romanticism, we find that aspect of imagination has been given great amount of importance by the Romanticist historians. So till the coming of positivism in history or till the application of positivism in history, we find that this was the usual way of interpreting history. And the positivist or the proponents of positivism in history, they contested that application of imagination in history cannot produce or is unable to produce true history or true knowledge in history writing. Positivism rejected individualism and discussed about masses, races, societies, and their tendencies. We find that positivism argued that Romanticism has overthrown instructive, moralizing, and serviceable history and hence insisted on the interdependence of social factors in the formation of historical events. When we talk about positivism in history, the most important person who had contributed in this regard was or is Auguste Comte. Auguste Comte was a French philosopher, thinker, and a sociologist in the 19th century. We find that Auguste Comte was a disciple of Henri de Saint-Simon, the French radical thinker and sociologist, and he played an important role in enunciating the positivist philosophy. Here we are talking about Auguste Comte, who had played an important role in enunciating the positivist philosophy. He followed the Enlightenment tradition, which believed that what was applicable to one society was valid for others and formulated universal laws applicable to the whole world. Comte favored this universal principle and perceived a parallel between the evolution of thought in history and development of an individual from childhood to adulthood. To Comte, the first two stages have become past, while the third stage, which is the positivist stage, has come up. So we find that he considered the positivist stage as dominated by science and technology, where the scientists have replaced the theologians and the priests, industrialists and traders have supplanted the warriors. So we find that Auguste Comte pointed out that in the positivist phase, the theologians or those people who interpreted history from religious perspective, those people are being replaced by scientists. So it was a phase where scientific laws were considered to be the way or the most important source of true knowledge. Comte believed in the absolute primacy of science and considered reasoning and observation as the means of attaining knowledge. For him, positivism would attain perfection if it could represent all phenomena as aspects of a single general fact. For example, gravitation. He gave the example of gravitation. Gravitation is the reason for every object falling towards the center of the earth. Indiscriminate to all objects, we find that this concept of gravitation could be applied to all objects. In this respect, positivism had a very close resemblance to the empirical tradition. Now the question comes, what is empirical tradition? Empirical tradition emphasizes on the role of sense experiences in producing facts or knowledge. So experience is the most important aspect connected with empirical tradition or empiricist tradition. As positivism is not concerned with individual facts and believes in general laws, these laws are derived at first by determining the facts through observation and experience and through determination of commonness among them. Thus, facts according to positivism are determined by sense experience and then tested by experiments which ultimately lead to the formation of general laws. So when we talk about Auguste Comte's ideas about positivism, he pointed out that first the facts has to be understood or comprehended by sense experiences. Then those experiences have to be verified with experiments. Only then the general laws connected to a certain historical occurrence or any occurrence connected to social science could be formed or framed. These general laws, like those in sciences, are related to the basic laws of human development. Comte thus considered the historians as mere collectors of fact. So he felt that once those facts are applied on general laws, or we can say it otherwise also, once these general laws are applied on these facts, the historical processes becomes clear to all of them, to all the people who work on these aspects. So thus we find that Comte pointed out that it is the historian whose role is confined or limited to mere collection of historical facts. When these facts are put under general laws, then they follow a trend. So this particular aspect is is the basic idea behind positivism. Now, when we talk about Comte's system of positivist philosophy, we find that we can base it, or we can frame it on the basis of some suppositions. Number one, Comte envisaged that the industrial society which the Western Europe has pioneered was applicable to the future society all of the world. So, that is the industrial society which we find in Western Europe. That model of industrial society could be applied to other future societies of the world, because the growth of industrial society in Western Europe has followed a certain trend. Some general laws has been formed or have been formed on them. Comte believed that scientific thinking, which he referred as positivist philosophy, was applicable both in sciences as well as on societies, on human societies to be more specific. Moreover, he thought that positivist philosophy would soon become prevalent in the whole world and in all societies. He felt that his positivist philosophy would be able to identify the general trend in all societies, and from this perspective, he felt that the interpretation of social sciences through positivist philosophy could be done similar to natural sciences. Comte believed that human nature was same everywhere. He felt that human beings in all the cultures across the world have similar type of reactions, feelings, and they behave in the same way under similar circumstances. So therefore, he felt, or he considered, that it is possible to apply the general laws of development to all societies. So Comte felt that all human societies could be interpreted with the help of the laws framed by him, the general laws framed by him. Comte's main ideas were derived from two sources. One was the principle of determinism found in the thoughts of Montesquieu. Montesquieu was a French political philosopher of the 18th century. All of us, we know about him. So what was the basic idea of the principle of determinism? In principle of determinism, it is believed that it is never true that people could have decided or acted otherwise than they actually did. So this was the basic idea of the principle of determinism. Then we find that Comte was also influenced by the idea of inevitable progress through certain stages provided by Condorcet. Condorcet was another French philosopher of the 18th century. So both these persons, the ideas of both these persons have produced a profound impact in the shaping of positivist philosophy by Auguste Comte. Auguste Comte strove to find in the human world a basic pattern which would explain everything, and thus for him a final result of all our historical analysis would be the rational coordination of the fundamental sequence of various events of human history according to a single design. So that is, human history will follow a single design. Now, what is the single design? Single design here in this context denoted the general laws, which he felt that could be applicable or could be applied to all human societies. The positivist method, as envisaged by Comte, would be observation of facts and data, their verification through experimentation, which would finally lead to the establishment of general laws. Thus, for the historians, Comte's method could have the following implications. Now the question comes, what are those? Number one, history, like sciences, is subject to certain general laws, and which could explain the process of human development. So when we talk about the basic characteristics of the positivist philosophy framed by Auguste Comte, the first characteristic is that history When we talk about application of positivism in history, the first point which Auguste Comte comes up with is that history, like sciences, natural sciences, is subject to certain general laws, and these laws could explain the process of human development. Number one. Number two, human mind progresses through certain stages which are inevitable for all societies and all cultures. So he felt that human mind thinks in the same way, irrespective of societies and cultures. People across the world think in the same way. They undergo the same stages of development. So he felt that if some general laws could be framed which are capable of interpreting human mind, then those laws could be applied to all human beings across the world. And number three, he pointed out that individuals cannot change the course of history. The course of history cannot be shaped or changed by men. The inductive method which Comte believed was applicable in sciences, consisting of observation of facts, experimentation, and then formulation of general laws. So thus, he felt that if these methods are applied in history, and because he believed that these methods could be applied in history, he felt that with this, a proper interpretation or explanation of historical past or shaping of culture, human behavior, these aspects could be done in a better way. Now, we shall speak about empiricism, because empiricism is an aspect which is intimately connected with positivism. When we talk about positivism, this is something which is intimately connected with positivism. Now, what is empiricism? The word empiricism is derived from the Greek word empiria. Empiria, the meaning of the term is experience. As we have spoken about this aspect earlier also, that Auguste Comte was vastly influenced by this concept. Now, in philosophy, empiricism means that all knowledge is based on experience, and experience alone is the justification of all knowledge in the world. So, thus, the empiricist, according to the empiricist, the knowledge acquired through tradition, speculation, theoretical reasoning, or imagination is not the proper form of knowledge. Then what is the proper form of knowledge? The proper form of knowledge is the acquisition of knowledge or information through experience. Therefore, the empiricists believe that the bodies of knowledge derived from religious systems, metaphysical speculations, moral preaching, art and literature are not verifiable and therefore not reliable. So what we find? We find that the empiricists reject knowledge gained through or knowledge acquired through religious systems, metaphysical speculations, moral preaching, art and literature, through tradition, through custom, through speculation, through imagination. All these aspects are discarded as forms of knowledge by the empiricist. The only form of acquisition of knowledge could be through experience, according to them. During the 18th century, Europe suffered from certain deficiencies in history writing. What were those? First, number one, was the concern of the historians for establishing universal principles of human and social behavior, which could not analyze the patterns of change and development in societies and polities. We find that the empiricists felt that considering all humans as similar, applying universal principles on human behavior may not be able to show or portray the changes, the internal minute changes in human behavior, and as a result in human tradition and formation of culture. Except Gibbon, most of the 18th century historians were not seriously concerned with providing empirical details. There was also a lack of critical acumen among many of the practitioners of history who relied completely on the sources and took their accuracy and truth for granted. So, thus, here you see, the empiricist felt that the cultural acumen was lacking. Now, during the 19th century, we find that the historian's perception towards history writing was influenced by the ideas of French Revolution. We know that French Revolution was a noteworthy epoch-making event in the history of Europe, more specifically in the history of France. From 1789 to 1799 it continued, and during this period we find that the political landscape of France was changed to a considerable extent. There was transformation in the institutions connected with monarchy, in the institutions connected with feudal system in France, and we find that the French Revolution produced a significant impact on the shaping of history during this period. People started to think about change and development in social and individual human behavior with careful and critical evaluation of sources before deciding on their veracity. We find that the Danish scholar Berthold Greg Niebuhr, he was a scholar during the late 18th and early 19th century, and he used the advanced method of linguistic studies and textual analysis for understanding sources while writing his book named The History of Rome. The book was published in 1811 and 1812. The initiation of modern historiography began with Leopold von Ranke, who is considered as the founder of modern source-based history. The Rankian method or approach to history writing can be summarized in this way. Like, number one, Ranke believed that past should be understood in its own terms and not as part the present. Thus, you see that we find that Ranke has spoken about a new concept. The concept with his way of looking into history, or with his interpretation of history, we find the notion of historicity being introduced in history writing. Now, what is historicity? Historicity is a historical dimension of human phenomena or the distinctive socio-cultural circumstances of a specific event or a series of events. So, the idea of Ranke and the empirical school produced or introduced the notion of historicity in history writing. Now, according to Ranke, it is the duty of the historian to uncover the spirit of a particular age. Ranke was an empiricist who believed that knowledge can be derived only through sense experiences. To him, knowledge of the past can come from the sources which are the objective embodiment of people's experiences connected to the period. So, he said that knowledge of the past can only come from the experiences of people who have faced the past, or who had memories about the past, who were the eye witnesses connected to the past. While deciphering, now here you see he emphasized on people's experiences connected to the past. While deciphering the past, a historian should not take recourse to imagination or intuition. This is an important aspect which Ranke pointed out, that imagination or intuition has no place in history writing. He was critical towards the sources used in historical research, which were based on imagination, and he did not have blind faith in them. To him, all sources were not equal, and therefore he advocated hierarchy of sources. The records produced by the participants or direct observers of an event were considered as primary sources according to him. Thus, with Ranke, we find the concept of primary and secondary sources. Again, let me repeat that the sources which were produced by the participants or direct observers connected to an event were primary sources, while secondary sources were produced by people about an event which they did not experience. These were not first-hand experiences. So secondary sources denoted those forms of experiences. Secondary sources have been given lesser credence than the primary sources while studying historical sources. Then we find that Ranke also emphasized on the importance of providing references. He pointed out that primary sources should be given more priority in historical writing. Secondary sources should be given lesser priority. A work would be considered as authentic when the work would be based on primary sources. He further refined and elaborated the technique already followed by Gibbon and other historians before him. This practice was important because it provided the opportunity to cross-check the evidences cited by the historians. Now, Ranke differentiated between facts and interpretations. We find that he pointed out that the first job of the historian is to establish facts and then interpret them. And Ranke and his followers not only established the methodology of professional history, but also helped in developing the institutions to support it. We find that Ranke started graduate seminars in the University of Berlin in 1833, where young researchers were they were trained in historical research. Ranke conceptualized history as a rigorous science which should abstain from metaphysical speculations and value judgment. Now here we shall speak about subtle differences between Comte's and Ranke's interpretation of history. Ranke emphasized that historians must put sources to philological criticism in order to determine their veracity. In contrast to Comtean positivism, he stressed the uniqueness of the events and not the universality. We find that Comte has spoken about general laws and universality, but we find that Ranke's viewpoints were opposite to that. He pointed to the uniqueness of events. By 1848, all German-speaking universities had adopted the Rankean method of writing history. After 1870, in most European countries, as well as in United States and in Asian countries like Japan, the Rankean method was adopted for historical studies. Thus, we can say that according to positivism, techniques applied in natural sciences is the essential way to acquire knowledge, true knowledge. This method was applied in social sciences by the 17th century with the emergence of the scientific revolution. It produced an impact on history when historians opposed Romanticist application in history and substituted individualism and discussions on masses, races, and societies. Auguste Comte, the French philosopher in the 19th century, influenced by the Enlightenment tradition, significantly contributed to the growth of positivism. Comte favored application of universal laws connected to man in social sciences and believed that what was applicable to one society would be applicable to other. Comte's positivism had similarity with the empiricist tradition that emphasized on sense experience on the production of knowledge. Thus, knowledge, according to positivism, are determined by sense experiences and then tested by experiments and verifications to form general laws which Comte considered as the basic law of human development, which was applicable to all societies. Contrary to him, we find that Leopold von Ranke, who was a German historian in the 19th century, considered uniqueness in historical events as more important. He contributed to modern source-based history writing and believed that knowledge could only be derived through sense experience without application of imagination. He believed in critical and unbiased evaluation of sources and hierarchized them according to their authenticity. Thus, we find the concept of primary and secondary sources in historical research. He also emphasized on cross-checking of evidences in historical research. Comte believed that the job of a historian is to establish historical facts and to interpret them. So this is the basic idea behind positivism in history, and with this we come to an end to the lecture concerning the topic. Thank you.